I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
An absolute firecracker tonight on Farage with me, Patrick Christie's. Can illegal migration be solved not by sending them to Rwanda, but an uninhabited British island? I will discuss that with a top politician who knows how to beat those lefty lawyers and the courts. And we will get an update live from Wimbledon, where a car crash into a school has sadly killed one girl. All of the latest on that. We will also have the latest on Nigel Farage's banking scandal. We went to Coutts to try and get a response, and, well, listen for yourself how well they reacted to our reasonable questioning.
GB News, do you think Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts?
No way. Well, there we go. We will show you the full reaction a little bit later on. But first, with some breaking news, it's Polly Middlehurst.
Yes, Patrick, this news just into us in the last few minutes. Let's report on an event that's taking place in Buckingham Palace in central London. We're hearing that a man has handcuffed himself to the gates of Buckingham Palace, and police are now negotiating with that individual. If you're watching on television, we are actually just now showing some pictures of the scene earlier on outside Buckingham Palace that we managed to get from Twitter for you. So police negotiating with that individual. As you can see, just onlookers not knowing quite what is going on have been asked to leave the area by the police, and the area around Buckingham Palace, we understand, is being cleared. It is a developing story. It has just come to us within the last few moments, and a man has handcuffed himself to the gates of Buckingham Palace. We'll see why or what reason is behind that just as soon as that detail comes to us. Now, in other news today, we can tell you that the Prime Minister has sent his condolences and his thoughts to the family of the 8-year-old girl who was killed today by a Land Rover which crashed into her primary school. The area was south-west London, in fact, Wimbledon. Police were called there just before 10 o'clock this morning to the study prep school. It was the last day of term at the school. 16 people, we understand, treated at the scene. 10 were airlifted to hospital by air ambulance. Police saying the driver, a woman in her 40s, has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. Well, with her voice breaking with emotion as she reported the death of the child, Detective Chief Superintendent Claire Kellen said the incident isn't being treated as terror-related.
Officers, along with colleagues from other emergency services, provided first aid to a number of people who had been injured. Very sadly, one of the children, an 8-year-old girl, died at the scene. Our thoughts are with her family at this incredibly difficult time. The driver of a car, a woman aged in her 40s, stopped at the scene and has since been arrested for causing death by dangerous driving and remains in police custody.
Well, in other breaking news that came to us today, the RMT union has announced a strike on the London Underground. Its members, we're told, will stop work from the 23rd to the 28th of July. Those services will run on the 24th. They're walking out in their continuing dispute over pensions and working conditions. The High Court has said today the government will have to hand over material requested by the COVID inquiry. The government says it'll do it by next week. It comes after the Cabinet Office lost its legal challenge over Boris Johnson's unredacted WhatsApp messages. Lawyers for the government had argued the material might be irrelevant, but the High Court ruled the inquiry must be given full access. And the government's had to launch a bid to take its Rwanda deportation policy to the Supreme Court. Last week, the Court of Appeal overturned an earlier High Court ruling which found Rwanda could be considered a safe third country for asylum seekers. But that comes as the House of Lords dealt a blow to the government, rejecting its illegal migration bill. MPs will now consider a series of amendments. Connor Chapman was found guilty today at Liverpool Crown Court of the murder of Elle Edwards. CCTV footage has been released showing the 23-year-old fatally shooting her outside the Lighthouse pub in the Wirral on Christmas Eve last year. Mr Chapman was convicted of her murder and of 7 other counts. He's expected to be sentenced tomorrow. Elle's father, Tim Edwards, said Chapman showed no remorse and thought he could get away with it. OceanGate, the company that managed the tourist submersible that dived to the Titanic shipwreck in the North Atlantic, we are told this afternoon has suspended all exploration and all commercial operations. OceanGate had planned 2 expeditions would take place next year. They're now cancelled, and the authorities are investigating the cause of last month's undersea implosion, which killed all 5 people on board. That's your latest news update. You are up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
We have found the solution to the Channel migrant crisis. It is time to set up detention centres on uninhabited islands off the British coast. This idea was put forward by Stephen Glover in the Daily Mail, and I think it works. I think this is it. This is the answer. Let's do it. We have several uninhabited islands, like Sampson on the Scilly Isles or Taransay in the Outer Hebrides. We should turn them all into giant migrant camps. And when we pick people up in the Channel, we can take them straight there. They are uninhabited, apparently, so no local residents will be disadvantaged. Building the one-off large-scale migrant camp will cost us a fraction of continually buying barges and renting out hotels and building new social housing. Crucially, these are British territories, so it completely removes the need to go through the courts and get a positive ruling on Rwanda. We would not be outsourcing our responsibilities. We would not be sending them to a country with a dodgy human rights record. We are, of course, a safe country. We currently have a situation where the people of Portland have a multi-million-pound barge docking in their port, soon to be full of free-range Channel migrant men. These people will stay for processing, but we all know that none of them will end up going to Rwanda. So the barge is full in a weekend, and then they probably just stay there indefinitely, massively impacting local residents. This problem is solved with Channel Migrant Island. RAF Scampton can get its £300 million regeneration scheme now, can't it? Because the 2,000 men that were going to be housed there can instead be housed on Channel Migrant Island. Taransay is 5 3/4 square miles, supposedly. It could easily accommodate about 50,000 people, couldn't it? They would be safe, and they would finally have the asylum that they so desperately craved. They would be, of course, very, very well looked after. We'd build the infrastructure, The public would also be safe, and some of those people would never have to go to Africa, to Rwanda, or in some cases, of course, go back to Africa. It shuts up the Human Rights Brigade, doesn't it? It would be cheaper in the long run, and it would, of course, crucially be a deterrent. It would also create jobs. We'd need people to work on Channel Migrant Island. All these legal loophole technicalities that have allowed our country to be absolutely rinsed by illegal immigration, well, it's about time we started turning the tables, isn't it? Yes, you can stay in Britain for processing and quite possibly be granted asylum, but you will spend your time on that island over there. Do you want that? Or does France suddenly look bloody lovely? What are the House of Lords going to do about this, eh? Say it'll cost too much to set up? I mean, the current plans are costing us billions. Will they say it's against people's human rights? How? It's a British territory. Surely they wouldn't be stupid enough to find themselves going on record and revealing that they actually care more for the well-being of the indigenous puffin population on a remote rocky outcrop than they do for the emotional, financial and physical well-being of actual British citizens. Our military managed to knock up a few army bases in war zones in Afghanistan. Camp Bastion apparently managed to accommodate around 24,000 people. Those Nightingale hospitals went up pretty quickly, didn't they? This solves all our problems. Well done, Stephen Glover, for cracking the problem. It's time we used our own resources to solve this issue. Let's get these islands set up now. Well, in the studio, joining me right now is Fadi Farage, Senior Legal Consultant at Gulbenkian and Donian Lawyers. Thank you very, very much, Fadi. Great to have you on the show and in the studio. Will this work?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. Will it work? Well, it is a plan B proposed by Stephen Glover. As a minimum, that's a plan B that the government doesn't have. So he's done something which one could say is at least better than what the government's proposed, because the government's pretty much put everything on the Rwanda policy and the Stop the Boats slogan. Stephen Glover bases his article on its reactionary to the Court of Appeal judgment, which came last week, which found that Rwanda is not a safe third country. And by taking that problem, or perceived problem, depending on which side of the political argument you're on, he's then proposed an alternative to cure that problem. But it doesn't mean that the proposal in itself doesn't create a new problem. And that new problem in this current proposal is that it's based on an isolated, uninhabited island, which will lack the infrastructure, and therefore, by definition, could also be perceived as an open-air prison, as a detention camp.
Or a deterrent camp, again, depending on which side.
A deterrent, exactly. Yeah. And so it then raises issues as to the right to liberty, as to whilst having your claim assessed, whether you should be in a state of detention because there is established laws or case law on the right to liberty, and that being in detention or in a state of detention is not permissible. If looked at from that point of view, then one man's processing centre is another man's open-air prison.
When it's sponsored by Hilton or something, then all of a sudden it goes from being a detention centre to potentially a hotel, which is not dissimilar to what was on offer in Rwanda.
And in effect, that will be a question of PR and presentation. But on the issue of cost, for example, it will cost a fraction of the cost initially. But you're then going to have maintaining infrastructure. You're then going to have staff. You're going to have access to doctors and medical professionals, perhaps schools, because people will want some access to education, or children that are there. And with that comes hospitals. The infrastructure around it will then add up to ongoing costs. So then we turn from the legal to the political, and whether the ongoing costs in the end is going to mount up. And if that happens, then we're actually proposing chucking money at something that may not be sustainable.
Absolutely. I thought about this, and I think that the financial argument has been won for Channel Migrant Island, because if we look at the hotel costs and the accommodation costs that are already predicted at the current rate to hit somewhere in the region of around £11 billion if we keep doing what we're doing now, the cost for social housing that will go through the roof, the cost on our existing infrastructure, because we are going to have to build new hospitals, I should say, probably have to build a few new hotels as well, new schools, new roads, new houses, everything for the existing level of people that we are accepting in as it currently stands. So we're going to have to do that one way or the other. So I don't see why Channel Migrant Island should be ruled out as a result of the costing side of it. You mentioned an important point there. I just want to revisit this. It's about the legalities of detention then. So it would have to visibly not be singularly a detention centre, would it? It would have to basically be a new small town.
Yes, and in that sense, it will then be for the courts to determine. So when we talk about the human rights issues or the Human Rights Brigade or the various arguments that go around, ultimately you're proposing something which may have some legs, but in the end will go down to adjudication in the courts as to whether this is a detention camp, open-air prison, contrary to Article 5, which provides everyone with the right to liberty, or whether it is, in fact, a facility, a town. Yeah. And then you're creating almost a country within a country.
You are. And just very quickly, on the human rights issue of it, because it would be a British territory, we wouldn't have any of those arguments that we've had with Rwanda, presumably.
No, so the argument in relation to safe country and degrading human treatment was based on Article 3. That solves that issue because it's on British soil, but then it raises the Article 5 point, which is the right to liberty and being in a state of detention, which is usually not the preferred method.
I must say, I found this absolutely fascinating, and thank you very, very much for that. That's Fadi Pratt there, who's a senior legal consultant. Joining me now is Anders Vistisen, MEP for the Danish People's Party. OK, the party were previously involved in plans in Denmark which would have seen asylum seekers sent to the small Danish island of Lindholm, which should have done its own PR, make a new home in Lindholm. But it didn't quite work, did it? Talk to me about that.
It didn't get off the ground. The Danish government there was an election, and the new Social Democratic government abolished the plan as part of their electoral manifest. But there were no substantial legal arguments against it. It was purely a political question why Lindholm was abolished as an idea in Danish migration policy.
OK, so just fill us in exactly what was the policy then? So what were you going to do? And that was fascinating, by the way, to say that it wasn't the law that got in the way of it, it was a general election, which I suspect maybe the opposite would be true if we did it over here. But go on, so what were you going to do?
The political agreement at the time was that you processed all asylum applicants and also all rejected asylum seekers, for instance, people who could not be war criminals that could not be returned due to concerns over their safety to the country of origin, or other people who couldn't be sent back forcefully. The idea was to put them on the island of Lindholm and there process their asylum applications. And if they were deterred from getting their applications approved, put them there indefinitely until the time that they could return to a country, preferably their home country or another country that would be willing to accept them.
And what was already on Lindholm? Did it have facilities already?
It had some old government facilities. It had actually been a test facility for contagious diseases. Right. So there had been some research done there historically on different contagious diseases. So there were some building structures there, but there were no no activities going on. So there were some buildings that were meant to be done up and refitted to the new purpose, but there were no people living there and no active engagement on the island.
And so even then, that was okay legally, because we had our legal professional friend here who raised a very good point, which is that maybe, one man's new town is another man's detention centre, and there may well be some rules and regulations about all of that. But you were essentially going to go ahead and plough ahead with this until an election happened, and that meant that you couldn't do it because I believe your party were based. Do you think that Britain should? Do you think that Britain should do this? We have a similar capacity in terms of the islands. Do you think this is our answer?
The answer to this illegal migration is deterrence. We can see that Denmark, as a country that have put a lot of effort on deterring people from coming, have dropped from one of the top receiving countries in the European Union to the very bottom. So, of course, if you want to reduce the number of migrants, you need deterrence from going to UK. It needs to be more attractive to stay in France than to go to the UK. I think the only legal argument we had to do was that we had to have a ferry going back and forward. But since you can price the ferry at a level where most people that doesn't work, and most migrant doesn't work in this case, can't afford the ticket, the assessment was that it was within the scope of the European Human Rights Convention. But of course, we also have similar problems with some elements of the European Human Rights Convention that are simply too political and where the court have gone too far in the interpretation of what is considered a human right and what is considered to be a justified self-defense of a national state.
That is absolutely fascinating. I would love to get you back on and talk to you again, because I do hope that this idea does genuinely have legs. And I think we could learn a lot from you and from what your party tried to do and from what the at least domestic level rulings were of the court. There's Anders Vistisen there, MEP for the Danish People's Party, and they were previously involved in setting up essentially something like what we've been proposing here. Stephen Glover of the Daily Mail has been proposing, but there we go. Look, get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Farage at GB News as well is another way of getting in touch with us. But up next, we go live to GB News reporter Lisa Hartle in Wimbledon for an update on today's tragic crash. Lots of unanswered questions there. We will also be giving you the latest on this ongoing breaking incident at Buckingham Palace, where a man has handcuffed himself to the gates there. So two big breaking topics for us in just a sec. Stay tuned.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Monday to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Go.
OK, two big pieces of news to bring you right now. Tragically today in Wimbledon, an 8-year-old girl has been killed. 10 people taken to hospital after a Land Rover crashed into a school. The Met Police said a woman in her 40s has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. She does remain in police custody. We're going to go to somewhere near the scene now with GB News' reporter Lisa Hartle. Lisa, thank you very, very much. We had a press conference earlier on with a representative from the police, the paramedics, the fire service and the school, clearly deeply, deeply distressed. An 8-year-old girl sadly died at the scene. What is the latest?
Well, about an hour ago, we saw what we believe to be the Land Rover being taken away on a recovery vehicle by police. It was covered in green tarpaulin. And police said earlier in that press conference there that the 16 people were treated at the scene. 10 of those were taken to hospital. The driver, who's a woman in her 40s, has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. And they're not treating this incident as terror-related. And earlier I spoke to local MP Stephen Hammond. Now, he told me that his daughter actually attended the school many years ago, and he said it's a school that for children aged 4 to 11. And have a listen to what he had to say.
I just wanted to say how saddened I am and what a tragic news, and to express my condolences on behalf of myself, but also the whole of the community, to the parents and the family of the young girl who's lost her life, and also, obviously, to those who are hospitalised at the moment. We hope that they will all recover. But this news has really shocked a number of local people. This is a well-known, well-liked local school. Lots of Wimbledon people have sent their children here over many years, and therefore it will have...
So he also told me that the road that the school is on, he said...
OK, we've just got a little problem with Lisa Hartle's connection.
The kind of road where you have to
sorry about
pull
that,
over.
Lisa. We'll just leave that there. That was Lisa Hartle, who was at the scene of that horrific incident that took place earlier on this morning. So the latest there is that there are still no updates when it comes to the condition of the 10 people who are, as we understand, still in hospital, some of them in a very serious condition. Now, there was another piece of breaking news that in fact just broke moments before we came on air, and that is that a man has handcuffed himself to Buckingham Palace. Polly Middlehurst joins me now for the very latest on this. Polly, thank you very much. Yes, so what do we know so far about what's going on?
Well, detailed sketchy at the moment. It is a breaking story, but we can tell you the London Ambulance Service is on scene because this man, believed to be in his 30s, has handcuffed himself to the gates of Buckingham Palace in central London. We also understand that police are now negotiating with that individual. There were some onlookers, of course, lots of tourists this time of year, taking pictures of Buckingham Palace in central London, wondering what was going on, and police beginning to clear the area, asking them to move away from the gates. Well, we do have a statement from the Metropolitan Police, and they say at around 17:23 hours, so that's 23 minutes past 5 to you and I, a man approached the gates of Buckingham Palace and simply handcuffed himself to them. Officers in the area immediately approached the man, believed to be in his 30s, and he began threatening to harm himself. The London Ambulance Service are on scene, and as we said earlier, police have said they are trying to speak to the man and bring the situation to a swift conclusion to ensure his and others' safety and welfare. That is all the detail we have on this at the moment. More as we get it. Patrick.
Thank you very much, Polly. Yes, absolutely. Obviously, that is a developing story. We will be bringing you all of the very latest up-to-the-minute updates on that. As we understand it, the negotiations are still taking place. Like I said, any developments, and we will bring them to you right here on this show. But, of course, this is Nigel's show, and so it would be wrong to not mention the big guy at all. As everyone will know by now, there has been a scandal, to say the least, taking place involving not just Nigel's banking, but a lot of other people's as well. Loads of other people, all of whom, it would appear, seem to have quite a similar political bent, who are struggling at the moment when it comes to their banking. Are they being pushed out of banks? Are they being cancelled by banks as a result of their political leanings? Well, we were a bit sick and tired, frankly, of getting no commented by people, and we decided that it was best to go to Coutts, which is the bank in question, and try to get some answers out of the people that work there. And, well, I'm just going to show you now a little taste of how it went.
GB News, do you think that Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts?
No comment, I'm afraid.
Yes, well, it all did get a bit spicy, I must say. So I will play you the full version of that very, very shortly. And, as well, find out about how the eco-warriors are now at war with each other. Yes, that's right. There is a eco-turf war taking place, which we will be dipping our toe into very, very shortly. It's going to be action-packed when I come back. Don't move.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Britain's news channel.
Now it's the story that has captured the nation. That's right. This man's very show that I have taken over for a week as some kind of soft coup, Nigel Farage and his banking scandal. Well, earlier this week, I told you that Coutts wouldn't comment on individual matters, despite a source briefing the BBC and the Financial Times, which, of course, did absolute wonders, didn't it, for the image that maybe there are political leanings at some banks, but there we go. So we decided to go down to the London headquarters and try to get some answers for ourselves. We asked them why Nigel's account had been cancelled, if indeed he should have one, and what they thought about briefings to the press. And, as we have discovered, good grief, if they knew about the bank's connections to slavery. We found John Coutts of the Coutts family, the founders of the bank, had links to a tobacco plantation in Virginia, and staff at the firm lived in a house that kept a slave. Our producer, Joe Casper, put all of that to the snooty bank. Take a listen on how we got on.
GB News, do you think Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts?
No way.
way. Do you think it's bad that Coutts has been briefing the BBC and FT News? Do you think it's right that Nigel Farage doesn't have an account with Coutts? Do you think Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts? Do you think Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts? Do you think it's right that Coutts have been briefing the press? Are you aware of their slave trade links? Thank you. GB News, do you think Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts? Hi, GB News, do you think Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts? Do you think it's right that Coutts have been briefing the BBC and FT?
I bank here, I don't work here.
I'm not working here, sorry.
No comment, I'm afraid.
Do you think that Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts?
I don't have an opinion on that.
Do you work for Coutts? Do you shop?
I don't have an opinion on it, but thank you.
Okay, thank you. GB News, do you think that Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts? Do you think it's right that Coutts have been briefing the press on Nigel Farage's personal bank information?
I have no idea at all. I'm not Coutts.
Okay. Thank you. Are you aware of Coutts' slave trade links? Do you think Nigel Farage should have a bank account with Coutts? Any comment on that? Thank you. Do you think it's right that they've cancelled his bank account? Thank you.
Gosh, it was lovely to see, though, that they did have the time to celebrate Pride Month there on the front of the building, wasn't it? Later, a spokeswoman came out of their ivory tower and told our producer that they wouldn't be commenting on any of those allegations which we put to them again. Well, Justin Urquhart-Stewart, a former director at Barclays International and now, of course, a financial expert, joins me now, I believe. Justin, thank you very much. There he is.
Hello.
Well, I mean, fascinating, isn't it? The staff at Coutts appear to have no knowledge whatsoever of historical slave trade links. I mean, good grief, for a clearly virtue-signalling bank there with the pride flag emblazoned all over them, I mean, that must have come as a deep shock.
I don't really have any idea at all. But of course, Coutts isn't a very special bank anymore. It's just part of NatWest. They bought it up. It's another brand, and they try and make it as a rather smart special brand bank, but it's not really. Would they know about anything to do with slave trading? No. What's quite interesting, though, is quite a lot of the banks, I have to say, like Barclays and one or two others, actually come from the old Quaker background, and of course they wouldn't have had any connection with it, diametrically the opposite. But even so, not many people in Barclays would have understood that or appreciated it. Actually, an awful lot of British business, inevitably in those days of empire, had very close connections with the slave trade and other probably more less pleasant areas that we wouldn't want to admit to these days.
No, exactly that. I mean, it was interesting, wasn't it, that none of them appeared to express any kind of view whatsoever as to whether or not Nigel Farage should be allowed a bank account there or any view on them, potentially anyway, closing it down. And I did think it was fascinating, though, that they seemed more than happy to brief people like the BBC and the Financial Times, but not us here at GB News. Nigel's latest crusade, as it were, is calling for the law to be looked at, to try to make sure that big banks cannot, under a complete cloak of anonymity and secrecy, be able to shut down someone's assets and financially non-person them just because, maybe, they don't agree with their political views. Would you back that?
Yeah, quite right. They should justify it, come out and actually say so. The other side of that, of course, is banks have to be very careful now about money laundering. Now, I have to say, London's actually very good at money laundering. After all, we know exactly how much Russian money has been money laundered because we did it. About 60 billion it's probably in London in various types. But what you'll find, which is I find it's not very amusing, but really rather odd, actually, if you've got an awful lot of money and then carrying out your money laundering operations, it's relatively straightforward. You try and open a deposit account or a current account, and you virtually have to put your child on deposit with the bank. The amount of detail you have to go through in order to actually open an account. Now, the bank, of course, has the right, if they regard you as a risk of some sort, but they should be saying, what's the risk? Why? Because otherwise, frankly, they would be opening themselves up to action by Nigel and others to sit there and say, you're besmirching my reputation just by turning me away. What are you implying that I am? So the banks need to be very careful on this, because otherwise sharp lawyers will be going back and having a go at them.
Yeah, sharp lawyers.
There's a difference between...
Sharp lawyers certainly will, but also the courts of public opinion, because you only have to scratch the surface on pretty much everybody to find any kind of hypocrisy whatsoever. It is just remarkable. The second that somebody virtue signals, you know, somebody sets up, for example, a vegan Good Earth bakery, and then it turns out that they may or may not have chopped down 135 rare protected trees in their own back garden to make way for some kind of lavish expenditure. You end up with people that decide that they want to back Extinction Rebellion, but they have to take a business class plane here and then back again, just all in the space of a couple of days, in order to be able to do this. You don't have to look very far, do you, to find utter hypocrisy? And if indeed it is the case, of course, that Coutts there as well, Coutts there with the big rainbow flag and all of this, oh, we're lovely and virtuous and we're sticking to the law, and then you look back a bit and you think, oh, gosh, did you have a slave?
Yeah, I mean, this is all greenwashing to a great extent, isn't it? To try and make sure they're seen to be doing the right thing. Do they actually believe it? Do they live up to it? You're familiar with those three initials that have become the fashion of this year: ESG, environmental, sustainable, and governance. Are companies really living up to that? Now, I'm pleased to say, actually, now one or two investment firms are saying, if you do not produce proper environment, sustainable, and governance rules and standards, you can measure it, then we won't be investing in you. But having said that, an awful lot of people would just be sitting there saying, it's another form of greenwash, we'll go along with it, but frankly, it doesn't really matter. What you'll find, though, is actually now a lot more banks, when in doubt, and you saw there with people not commenting, don't say anything at all. By all means, leak it to the BBC or someone like that. But if you're going to be actually going out in public saying so, well, you'll find your career will actually end quite quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one final one with you, if that's all right. As you will know, we have launched our Don't Kill Cash campaign. And when we look at videos like that the wonderful Joe Casper went and got, you see all those snooty people coming down from their ivory tower, probably pockets laden down with the weight of their own bank cards, just thinking about how on earth they can invest other people's money to make themselves more money. And you think, actually, you know what? Maybe cash should still be king, shouldn't it? So do you back our Don't Kill Cash campaign?
Yeah, you still need cash. You're going to have it in some form or other. And the trouble is, an awful lot of people of a certain age find it very difficult not having cash. Go back, I have to say, several decades ago now, to the time when we moved from old currency through to decimalisation. Those people over 50 at that stage hadn't got a clue what was going on, and it was really very difficult. Now we're finding a position where if you get rid of cash, and people of a certain age aren't used to the technology, don't understand what's going on, and so you're disenfranchising those people. That's unfair and really should be stopped. No, we need cash. You're still going to have it. What I found so funny was actually last year, down in southern Italy, they had abandoned small coinage of euros because there weren't any, and your change came in sweets, would you believe?
No. That's like going back to the dark... I mean, the lovely sugar-infused dark ages, but still, the dark ages nonetheless. Justin, thank you very much. An absolute pleasure as always. Justin Urquhart-Stewart there, the former director at Barclays, and, of course, now a financial expert. That address there is gbnews.com/cash. Sign our campaign and our petition to make sure that we can continue to have cash as legal tender and regularly accepted in shops everywhere in this country until at least 2050. Get the power away from the big banks. Get the power away from these strong vested interests and quite literally put it back in your pocket. Now, we mentioned greenwashing there. Get a load of this. This is going to be lively because we've got a debate between Just Stop Oil and Climate Majority Project, who have slammed the former's tactics, OK? So we now have, what would you call it, green-on-green fighting. Essentially, the eco-warriors are at war with each other, and hopefully that plays out live on air in a second. See you in a tick.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Here we go. A veteran eco-campaigner has dismissed the tactics used by Just Stop Oil protesters. Swampy, whose real name is Daniel Hooper, says despite the protesters who disrupt traffic or sporting events being brave and passionate, he thinks that real change will come from working with people from different walks of life. It comes as Just Stop Oil disrupted some of Keir Starmer's speeches in Kent, asking him to reinstate a pledge for £28 billion of annual climate funding. He responded, telling protesters to just stop. I believe that might have actually been another group, to be fair, but there was Just Stop Oil as well that we've seen, of course, at the cricket, etc., and at the tennis. They've been everywhere, Just Stop Oil, haven't they? Well, look, to discuss this now is Sean Irish from Just Stop Oil and Professor Rupert Reed from the Climate Majority Project. Both of you, thank you very, very much. So I'll go to you first, Professor Rupert, if that's all right. So am I right in saying that you think that Just Stop Oil should just stop?
Well, not really, Patrick. The point that we are making, firstly, in the Climate Majority Project, is that the objective that we have is all basically the same, right? Most ordinary people, most real people now recognize quite fully that we have to get off our addiction to oil, that we should stop drilling new oil, and that we should transition to an economy which won't destroy our children's futures. There is a disagreement of some degree, of course, about tactics. So what we in the Climate Majority Project are here for is for all those people who do not want to engage with the kind of tactics that Just Stop Oil employ. The objective is essentially the same. The question is how we're going to get there. And what we encourage people to do is to engage in action in their communities, in their workplaces, in their professions, within the law, to move in the right direction in the chronic absence of sufficient leadership from the government.
OK, right, so, Sean, I'll throw that back over to you. I mean, there was some pretty staunch criticism elsewhere as well. Does it bother you that you know, people like Swampy, I can only imagine, is an icon. Don't agree with what you're doing?
I mean, I have been in a tunnel thanks to the help of Swampy, but that's besides the point. Yeah, we are...
We don't talk about national television stuff.
No, of course we're not. Like, Swampy hasn't actually come out and opposed what Just Stop Oil has said. That is, you know, that's a misrepresentation of what Swampy's saying. What Swampy is saying and what Rupert is saying, and they're both absolutely correct, is that we need the majority to be on side. We need action that's going to come with, you know, cooperation. And of course, you know, groups like the Climate Majority can offer that to people, but you also need the radical flank. Just Stop Oil is the wedge that brings the conversation into the stratosphere. People would ignore us if we didn't take these actions.
Well, will they? And I'm going to throw that over to you then, Rupert. Is Sean the necessary radical flank?
It's a really interesting question. I think the place to start here is back in 2019 with Extinction Rebellion. And I think it's very clear that Extinction Rebellion really opened up the space. And whatever anyone thinks of Extinction Rebellion, you can't deny that they really did get these issues into the public consciousness in a big way. And that is a very important thing to do. Of course, the issue here also rebounds back onto the media. It's a question of what the media pays attention to. Our view in the Climate Majority Project is that it would be a really good thing if the media paid more attention to the kind of slower, patient work that people like us are trying to do in communities, in neighbourhoods, in professions, etc. So, for example, I'm talking to you from the border of Norfolk and Suffolk at a pub which is community-owned, which is socially owned, which is very close to an area of land which is farmed by a group of people together who are creating resilience against the climate damage future that is coming.
So
these kinds of projects are springing up all over the country, and we support them in the Climate Majority Project. We actively support them. It's called Community Climate Action.
Okay.
What we need is for this kind of thing to be scaled up and to be supported much more. And it would be a really good thing if the media were to give us attention.
If you were to talk about that. I understand that. With respect, just for time pressures, you have now spoken a little bit about that. Sean, I mean, he has got a point, hasn't he? Because, you know, basically, the only times that, you know, people like me talk at you, really, is when someone's covered you in milk or thrown water off a balcony and, you know, maybe someone's got very angry in the streets. And frankly, people hate you.
Well, I think Rupert did raise an excellent point, actually. The media is failing us astronomically. You only talk about the climate crisis when we throw orange paint or when someone throws milk at us. If you brought on climate scientists onto your show, if you went to people like Rupert and, you know, went to these community-based places and actually highlighted these, the need for Just Stop Oil could disappear overnight. If the government did what it needed to do and ended new oil and gas licences, we would not be on the street. Unfortunately, action is needed.
Isn't it, Sean? It's a campaign, Sean, and part of a campaign means that you have to bring the public with you. And I dare say that you've managed to alienate pretty much everybody, from the white van man right through to the kind of middle-upper-class person who goes to the opera, Sean.
Can you tell me who we've convinced that they will just lie down for an oil baron's profits and die because they dislike us that much? How many people are going to let their children starve to death because they don't like what we're doing? And a man in an orange high vest got in someone's way, and now I'm going to let my children die. You know, no one is thinking that you might not like Just Stop Oil. I don't like what we do. It's, you know, it shouldn't be necessary, but it is not making people think, yeah, you know what, I'll let my children die. Let the oil barons have all their profits just to spite them. No one's saying that. They might not like us, but they want the same thing.
OK, I'll throw it over to you, Rupert. Hey, some people might just say, you know what, Rupert, if you had a bit of bottle about you, you wouldn't be sending young, impressionable adults and, in some cases, dare I say it, children to go and do the dirty work of the climate agenda. You know, put your money where your mouth is. I don't know, maybe you do have a criminal record. You don't have to disclose it. Why don't you get a criminal record for your cause? Come on.
So, look, I was in Extinction Rebellion before, and I did undertake criminal damage, of which I'm very proud, for the sake of throwing the spotlight onto the climate change deniers of the Global Warming Policy Foundation. But now I've changed tack, and what we're trying to do in the Climate Majority Project is to appeal to all the people who don't want to undertake the kind of things that Just Stop Oil do, but who are concerned, as Sean absolutely rightly says, that our children's lives are now on the line. We had the hottest day in history on Tuesday. We had the second hottest day in history on Monday. Everyone can see that the climate is changing, that it is damaging us and damaging our future. It's going to get worse for a long time to come. What is absolutely critical is that everyone who cares about this issue, and a majority do care, that in one way or another, you get involved. So I'd urge people, for example, to go to climatemajorityproject.com and you can start to get involved there.
All right. OK, look, I'm just going to finish, Sean, if that's right. I always ask to stop all this, and I get a variety of different answers. Would you bring children into the world, Sean, or do you think that's a bad thing right now?
Well, I've tried for a long time to get my boyfriend pregnant, but haven't succeeded yet.
Do you think that people should be reproducing, Sean?
I don't think that's a decision for me to make. I can neither get pregnant, nor do I intend to get anyone else pregnant. So that would be a decision that would be among those people to make.
Because that is the thing that I speak to a lot of people from Just Stop All about, and quite a few of them say, look, we shouldn't be having any more kids.
I think there's possibility of hope. I think people need to take action on the climate crisis. They can join us and get a criminal record, or they can go plant some fruit with Rupert. But either way, they need to do something.
OK, and good luck with your boyfriend, by the way. Right, OK, that's Sean Irish there from Just Stop Oil and Professor Rupert Reed from the Climate Majority Project. Good stuff, I enjoyed that. Right, OK, now, Donald Tusk, the former EU president who once said that Brexiteers are a special place in hell, appears to have adopted the famous Brexit line of take back control. The former bureaucrat has now decided that he does fancy participating in a democratic election as he attempts to become Poland's next Prime Minister. Tusk has said that Poles must regain control over their country and its borders, whilst also warning of the dangers of failing to stop arrivals from Islamic countries. I'm starting to think that his anger at Brexit was simply fuelled by the fear of losing his cushy job. Tusk, this is hypocrisy at its finest, but I am pleased to say that you are now a fully fledged Brexiteer. Jacob Rees-Mogg joins me now. Jacob, have you ever stolen an enemy slogan?
No, I think he's a Polexiteer, isn't he? I'm a Brexiteer.
Well, he would be, yes, of course he would. But it's nice to see that the common sense approach is rubbing off on him, finally.
There is more joy in heaven over the one sinner who repenteth than the 99 who are not in need of repentance. I think this is marvellous, and I hope that Ursula von der Leyen, when she goes back to Germany, will suddenly say that Germany should leave too. And if I could remember the names of any of the other commissioners, I'd list them.
Right, what's coming up on your show?
We're going to be talking about housing. Why do we don't have enough houses? Why the rental market's so difficult? And if there's a way to make this better. And we're also back to the banks. Is it really a free speech issue? Is it politicians who can't get accounts? What's going on? Why is it so difficult? And how much are we as politicians to blame for the laws we've passed, which, were EU laws in the first place?
Ah, there we go, Jacob. It'll be box office as ever. Thank you very much. Make sure you stay tuned because Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation is coming your way.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Pretty warm and sunny for the vast majority tomorrow. Will be a bit of a damp start across the north and gusty too in the northwest, thanks to this area of low pressure. It's been bringing wet and windy weather for most of the day across Northern Ireland, and now pushing further and further in across Scotland. Some quite heavy bursts of rain on this weather front, and gusty winds too in western Scotland, the east of Northern Ireland, and usually windy here for the time of year. Staying blustery and pretty wet across most of Scotland and Northern Ireland through the night. A few showers for northwest England, north and west Wales, but most of England and Wales just dry. Plenty of clear skies across the south and the east. Quite a warm night, warmer than last night, but not as warm as it will be on Friday night and into Saturday. Before we get there, though, let's get through Friday, which does start dull and damp across the central belt of Scotland, much of Northern Ireland. That rain does pull away, though, to the north. The afternoon may spark some thunderstorms over parts of western Scotland and the west of Northern Ireland in particular, some lively ones too. For many places, though, it's a dry, fine day tomorrow. Lots of pretty hot sunshine, actually, over the Midlands, South Wales, southern and eastern England. Temperatures in the east could get close to 30 Celsius. Quite a humid feel as well. Further thunderstorms